are brought here today to solve this thing called transfer. I like to say frequently that whenever I got into this work and we started the Institute, I thought, okay, we've got about a decade that we can be in on this, and then probably we'll have solved the issue. We will be moving on to another higher education pressing situation, and then we will just go from there. But 17 years in, and we're still talking about it. And then we really, in this gathering right here, want to spend time talking about how we're going to come together to simplify that complex thing called transfer. Now, if you were to talk to a teaching and learning researcher, professional, they would probably tell you that a conference setting, in all honesty, is probably not the best learning environment, right? It's coming at you like this. Everything you're learning is going to be coming at you so fast, so swiftly. We only give you 10 minutes to transition or 15 minutes to transition in between each one of your sessions. You might get a little bit of downtime at night to think about what you learned, but more than likely you're meeting new friends and having a good time, or unfortunately checking email and responding at night. So we decided that we wanted to give you an opportunity to think about what you're doing here before you go do it. And so I'm going to ask Emily Kittrell to come join me on stage to talk a little bit about embracing your transfer lenses.
Thank you. So in your bag, or as you walked in, everyone should have received a worksheet. So during this session, we're going to make you work just a little bit. Pull out your sheet, pull out a pen, and we're going to talk about our transfer lenses. I'll give you just a second. All right, so you didn't know you'd get put right to work, opening session. Here we go. So have you ever heard that saying, rose-colored glasses? You know what I mean by that, right? You look through these lenses and everything's just rosy. It looks really good. Have you ever wondered what it feels like or seems like to look through your transfer lenses? As future transfer champions in this room, you all are looking at transfer with a unique perspective. And I think it's important that we take some time to explore what's informing your transfer lenses. What kinds of things are on there? So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to challenge you. When you see this image, and these are transfer students and they are wonderful. You see them, maybe you recognize some faces in there and you're like, yeah, seen you before. What do you think? What do you see? What comes to mind? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and I want you to fill out your transfer lenses. Write the words that you think inform your perspective on transfer. Now to get you going, here are some things to keep in mind as you do this. Our lenses are informed by things like assumptions, attitudes, culture, expectations, experiences, emotion, and motivation. So as you think of your work with transfer students, what's on your lenses? How are you viewing these people? Take a minute, write it down. Okay, so believe it or not, it's only been about 1 minute. It felt long, right? What do you think? Now I'm going to tattletale on myself just a little bit. So I'm curious to know what you guys put on there, so catch me later and see and let me know. But if I had asked myself to do this activity several years ago, here are some of the things that would have shown up on my lenses. See if this sounds familiar. Okay, so before I came to NISTS, I worked at a small 2-year regional campus, and there I wore a couple of dual hats, and that was orientation and registration. So of course, I'm going to see transfer students through the lens of orientation and registration. Let's get them in, let's get their classes, get them in the door, right? I also had to balance that with this idea of customer service. To me, I was a frontline worker, and it's important for me to give good customer service to all these transfer students who are coming in. And so with that, I wanted to feel compassion for their situations. Transfer students often have a lot of issues going on, and so I need to have compassion as they're coming to me, right? Okay, but here's the thing. Sometimes transfer students are time-consuming. I don't know if you've ever had this, but you come and you got a transfer student and they're like, I just have this one question. Turns into about 12 questions. Half an hour later, right, we're still working on sorting things out for them. So they're time-consuming. It takes a lot of time to give them good customer service. Somehow they are simultaneously clueless, right? We're like, you've been to school before. You should know this, right? And then at the same time, they're like arrogant and they're like, I don't need orientation. I've already done this elsewhere, right? They're like, Okay. And if I'm honest, they may seem really disengaged. We hear all of the time, students, transfers don't want to do anything. We can't ever get them to come in any of our programs. They don't want to be a part of this campus. Okay. And then here's the thing that killed me the most. A lot of times I found myself saying, I can't do that. Go over there instead. Or I can't answer that for you. You need to go over here instead. Right? That was bad. And then I found myself making referrals constantly. I can't tell you exactly what you need to know, so I need you to go connect with this person. Does this sound kind of familiar? Well, I remember the day vividly that my lenses got a punch. And they shifted pretty dramatically the day that Nick came into my office. Right? So you can see he's a white male, clearly an adult learner, so that is very typical of the type of demographics we saw on my particular campus. That might not be true for you. But the day Nick came into my office, I was wearing my registrar's office hat, so I was administering class registration, helping students get ready, resolving holds, picking classes, using what we use, Banner, so helping them try to find all of their classes. And he says, hey, remember me? You guys had that before? So I had this simultaneous moment of like, panic. Did I help you, Nick, or did I not help you? I couldn't remember, right? So I'm like, oh, hey. Don't remember you right off the top of my head, but tell me what's going on. I bet I'll remember real soon. Yes, okay, so he starts telling me the story, and of course it starts all flooding back. It was actually several months prior that Nick had come into my office, and he came in. It was right in the middle of spring registration. He had his course planning sheet in hand. He comes in and he says, hey, I'm trying to get ready to register, and I just need someone to double check this and make sure it looks right before I get ready to go do this. So first, like, hello, yay, you're being proactive, Nick. I like you already. So we're looking at his sheet. I'm like, you know what? I am not a staff advisor, but I'm happy to take a quick glance just to see if anything looks out of place. We'll get you on track, see what we can do. So I look through, and lo and behold, he is going to sign up for 2 classes he does not need. At a 2-year campus, we deal primarily with the core curriculum, so to me it was pretty obvious he had transfer credit for specific classes that would fit right in those areas, and yet somehow he had come up with these 2 classes he was going to double dip. So I was like, okay, here they are, you don't need these, let's make an alternate plan, try this, this, and this. Here's Banner, here's the steps, here's how you go in, check your holds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it comes out, I say, so Nick, how did you come up with this? Were you just trying to choose them on your own or what? And he's like, no. My faculty advisor told me those specifically. Now, I'm not pointing any fingers. I don't know what that conversation actually entailed, right? Because it could very legitimately be that the faculty advisor told him wrong information. It could be that Nick just heard and interpreted wrong information and ended up with those wrong classes. But it's okay because we found him. We made an alternate plan. I said, okay, here's what you're going to do. We looked at the website. And then I said, okay, but you need to go talk to Melissa in advising. She will double check our work and make sure we're doing this correctly. This is okay, I'm going to go do that, blah, blah, blah. Yay, good for me. So then, as I'm remembering all this, he's telling me, then he says, you know what? You saved me that day from disaster. And I was like, what? It's only 2 classes, bud. Just do my job. Thanks. You know, on the one hand, I felt really good because clearly I had done what I was trained to do. I set him on track. I connected him to the proper resources. I showed him the website. Good for me. But on the other hand, I have to confess that I felt terrible. Because when I looked at what I'd done, wasn't it really enough? Did I walk him over to Melissa's office? Did I give Melissa a call and a heads up to say, hey, Nick is coming, watch out, because I need you to set him straight? Did I do anything with that faculty advisor to double check and make sure he was aware of what we were looking at in the core and how those classes matched? If I was honest with myself, the answer is no. I didn't even talk to anybody in my own department about how obviously important it is for students to get the right information. See, what Nick told me was, hey, you saved me from disaster. Because if I had taken those extra classes, I could not have applied to nursing school on time to get into my cohort, and I would have been a year behind. Just twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the next round of applications. He was married, his wife was also in school, and they were looking ahead to plan a family. So that seemingly tiny mistake could have actually really derailed his academic journey. So as he left, he thanked me. I said, hey, no big deal, happy to do it, obviously. I was there to sit with myself for a minute and really say, wow, I helped him in that moment, and I actually really did do good registrar's work right there. That's what I was trained to do. But he could have hit any number of barriers after me. And I don't know that I did a very good job of preparing him for that. I didn't connect him with anybody at my school directly. I didn't connect him with anybody at his future school. So my lenses got a big shift. They were still certainly orientation and registration, customer service, compassion. Those will always be a core of what I do with students. But also front and center, those barriers that we see so often, things like credit loss, diffuse and wrong information, unclear pathways. And here's the thing that I struck with. What is my role in getting these students successfully through the pipeline? So I sat with it, felt bad a little bit, and decided, you know what? I'm going to have to do better. I need to learn about transfer students. So I do what you do. We Google it. Okay? I Googled it, and guess what came up? No, NIST was not even in the top 10. This was several years ago, okay? It was bad news. I looked around and I found some stuff, right? But it's either too vague and I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to pull from it, or too specific and I was like, well, I do not work in that office. I can't see the connection there, thanks. So I found a whole lot of nothing, tried to put some stuff together, picked up little pieces here and there. So of course, what do you do next? You go to the journals. We work on campuses, so we can look at all that stuff pretty easily. But you know what? TLDR, can't wade through all that stuff. It's deep and it's heavy. There's so much good research out there now, especially several years later. But I didn't have time to wade through all of that stuff. So I did what I could. Eventually, I did end up at the NISTS conference, and I'm so thankful because it's just a great place to be with other like-minded people who get it. And those light bulbs start to come on. And the thing that became abundantly clear to me over the next several months and years as I figured all of this stuff out is this. Only when we understand the broad context for and implications of our work will we be best equipped to proactively design the high-quality supports our students need to get them through the transfer experience. Now, when I say context, I mean the whole thing, that whole ecosystem of supports and processes that are in place, how my department connects with itself and with each other and outside, within my institution, outside my institution, within the system, the context of, and the implications of my work. What happens if I do a really good job here? Where does it connect? What happens if I do a really bad job here? What happens? So if only I had known then what we're going to show you today. I hope it's helpful. Internally at NISTS over the past year, we've been really working hard to look at what's out there because we get it. You can Google and you can do your search in JSTOR and you're going to get a lot of information, but what do you do with it? Where does it go? So we've created these broad umbrellas or buckets, if you will, that as you go into this fire hydrant of sessions, we want to help you start to categorize this information, not just within your functional unit, right? But that broader context and implication of all of our work together. So if you'll flip your lenses to the back, you have a copy of our framework. And we're going to walk through it together a little bit so that you can get your bearings. But take notes here, hold on to it, and we're going to go through it together just a little bit. Okay?
So when you look at this framework, see, it's got three pieces to it. Again, this is our conference learning framework. The first thing that you look at, and this is your way to organize whatever it is that you're going to learn today. Like we said, that fire hydrant. We think that it can probably fall in one of these three categories. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the transfer landscape. And within that, we're talking about everything around us. Higher education is a very complex place. We have folks who are really questioning the value of a college degree, and most certainly the affordability of that college degree. There are lots of factors playing in just in the higher education culture that is influencing how we're looking at things and in the climate. We know that changing enrollment patterns are very important to our institutions. We have some institutions who are really thinking very strongly about bringing in transfers to cover some deficits that perhaps they're going to have with fewer numbers of high school students who are going to be coming into their institutions. So now transfer students have shifted to become a very high need for institutions. So those changing enrollment patterns, we're seeing more adult learners coming back to school. We're seeing people going in all different patterns. So that whole notion of enrollment is an important piece of that transfer landscape. So you're going to learn about things related to that at the conference. And then also those external mandates, many of which are often unfunded, but yet highly critical mandates. Those are those initiatives that your institution latches onto, or perhaps your state system latches onto, or perhaps your state legislature has decided that they know a lot about transfer, and you all know, those of you who live in those states, that there are some folks who are very proud of their transfer knowledge, but probably haven't been on your campuses in a while. So there's a lot going on in that area. So we have some questions as you're going through, because again, all these things are happening out here, but I guarantee you there's that trickle-down effect, and we look at this as the one key takeaway we want you to think about under this category is mobility is reality. We know that students are moving, whether it's their credits or their physical beings, into and out of institutions at a higher rate than ever before. And they're not just doing it once, they're doing it more than once, they're doing it thrice, they're doing it over and over again. So if your institution appears to be traditional in the sense that they don't have as many transfer students as in the past as others, that could be changing. So we think about mobility as being a reality, and before long it will be some piece of that will be a part of your world as well. So you need to be thinking in your departments and in your world what this means for you. So there are some questions on your cheat sheet that we want you to think about as you're in your sessions, because again, the whole point of this is to stretch, to look at your lenses and add to those lenses. So what's happening at this big landscape level, and then potentially, how might these emerging issues, whether it's enrollment, whether it's the climate of higher education, or whether it's whatever's going on from those mandates, how then does that affect the work that you do? Because I can tell you now, it does and or it will. You will not be able to hide. And then finally, what do you need to know to be prepared to manage those changes? And that's where you have to be really strategic in what you're looking at and what you're attending at this conference, to really think about where are those gaps? And how can I fill in those gaps with the knowledge that I'm going to learn here? For you.
And next is the transfer student experience. And this is, of course, why we're all here. And we've got some experience with this. So the key areas in the transfer student experience. First up, what we're calling the transfer student life cycle. You can probably guess what we mean by that, but literally the stages through which a transfer student goes as they do that transition between institutions. So we're classifying this all the way from point of interest, whenever transfer got on their radar, right? All the way through getting ready to transfer, doing that process, getting into the institution and getting acclimated, and then all the way to completion. So this life cycle of transfer students, all encompassing. Every one of you, your department hits somewhere in that life cycle. So are you thinking big about where that is and what's coming before and what's going next? Then diverse student needs and identities. We've said before that transfer students are some of the most diverse students on our higher ed campuses. And we know, too, that these are often our most at-risk students. So they are students of color. They are first generation. They are low income. They are often adult learners. They are veterans. Then, of course, new issues like food insecurity, homelessness, heavy stuff is coming up. Some students are caregivers. But they have such diverse needs and identities. And, of course, it's the intersection of all of those coming together that makes their journey sometimes really difficult. And then, of course, transfer programs and services. Anything you're offering to help move along in the life cycle and make it smoother, more seamless. Anything from advising, orientation, career services, you can get creative there. Any kind of program or service that impacts that student experience. So for reflection here, as you think about this, here is the big idea we want you to take away. here's a big surprise to you all. Get ready. Transfer is complex, right? Not only do the students have a lot going on, but us as institutions have just a whole other whirlwind of issues going on. And when the two combine, perfect storm, right? It can get pretty crazy. But what we can take away from that is that every single interaction you have with students is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to propel them forward or potentially set them back, derail or pause or cool down their aspirations. And I want you to think, too, that every interaction is an opportunity, not just with students, but your colleagues. As you are here learning this new information, now you have an opportunity to go out and share it with the people with whom you work. So here are some things to consider. Does our infrastructure facilitate a smooth transition into and between institutions? What's your infrastructure like? Do I really know how our students are preparing for and experiencing the transfer transition, or am I making some assumptions? What's your assessment data look like? Been doing some quantitative stuff? Good. What about qualitative stuff? Yeah, are you talking to your students? And then, am I helping students see the big picture of their college journey and prepare for what's coming next? Or are we just doing those isolated moments and filling in what's right in front of us? And finally, are we offering students enough support so that they can acclimate to and engage with their campus communities, both academically and socially? Is there enough out there for transfers? And does it say transfer on it, or is it open to the masses and we just hope they find their way to it?
The third area that we want you to be looking for opportunities to learn is around advocacy. And we say that we fully believe that everybody in this room is well attuned to what advocacy means on behalf of transfer students. So let's think about those key areas. Are you developing that transfer receptive or that transfer affirming culture on your campus? And what does that look like? And what role do you play in being that bullhorn to talk about it? Or are you just looking at those little areas that you can influence? How are you then supporting that culture? What does it look like? Our partnerships and our collaborations. You heard Dr. Bragg talk earlier about the work that's being done in this area, and partnership with the little p and partnership with the big P. Is it a partnership in name only? Or is it something that's really well developed and meaningful and not just something on a piece of paper? Or are we looking at intentional communication? One of the most important pieces of this is just what do you know about your transfer students? But it can't stop there. You have to be able to talk about that. How are you communicating what you know? How are you going to communicate what you're learning at this conference back to those who aren't able to be here today? How do you take that enthusiasm and make it work for you? So here again, on your cheat sheet, you've got some questions for consideration around the notion that transfers need champions. And that's where you come in, and that's where you're highly critical. It's our job, and each and every one of you has that opportunity in ways that you probably haven't thought through completely to affect change on behalf of your students. So how transfer affirming or how transfer receptive is the culture at your institution, and how can you make it better? Because you can. Who are your current transfer partners? And again, digging a little bit deeper, who could you recruit? And who needs to come to the table that might be a little skeptical? Very important. And then who are our transfer students? Do I know them? What have I shared about them? And what are the implications of having them? What's that kind of push on our infrastructure, our policies, procedures, etc., equipped to deal with those transfer students that we've identified? So lots of things to think about around that as well. So from that perspective, never to leave you to your own devices, we've given you a hot reminder. In your bag, you have these stylish sunglasses. Now, you probably want to remove the sticker before you go too far, which I failed to do. But as you're going through the conference today, we really encourage you to challenge yourself. A, identify those lenses you're bringing with you. B, think about those things that maybe you haven't considered that are influencing the way that you think about, research, explore, transfer students. And then what is it that you can go out there and get your hands on today, tomorrow, and Friday to fill in those gaps, to supplement what you're doing, and to advance what we know is your passion and your mission to support the transfer students that are either on your campuses that you're working with every day, or those that you're learning about and propelling forward with all of the research that you're doing, what you're teaching in your classes. We know you're doing great things on behalf of transfers. So go forth, make it happen, and have a great conference.